Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We shall wait a couple of more minutes so that we are sure that everybody joined who wished to join. In the meantime, I would like to thank very much to Jasna and Vesna for organizing this very complex event and for making it run so smoothly in spite of technical difficulties which are unavoidable in this particular medium. So I hope that everybody's having a good time and a very inspiring conversation and very inspiring discussions. Certainly the keynote lecture yesterday moved lots of thoughts in my head. Okay, perhaps we can start now if the organizers are okay, if the organizers think it is fine to start on time, because there is a tight schedule for the afternoon. Okay, once again, everybody, welcome to the contextual and spatial analysis related to function use and consumption. This session has 3 speakers announced, and the time slots are again 20 minutes, 15 minutes for the presentations themselves, and 5 minutes for possible questions, short ones, because the general ones will be left for the general discussion. I will take the liberty of the chairperson of this session to announce when 13 minutes have elapsed. I will give a notice to the speaker so that you can wrap up, so that we can finish on time. So our first speaker for this session will be our colleague Albert Ribera y Lacomba, and he will be speaking about peculiar assemblages in Hellenistic and Roman Pompeii, from the ritual to the catastrophe. So please, Albert, can you join us with audio and video, please? Is everything okay with the connection? Okay, now we are. Can we have video, please?
Hello? Hello?
And your volume is very low. We are still not having any sound or visual from Albert. Can you enable your camera and your microphone, please? Okay, now we see you.
Hello?
Yes, your volume is very low. Can you just speak up a bit? Can you say something so that we can hear whether the sound is okay?
Szóval mert teljesen megtörik. Nem hiszem, hogy lehet ezt külön mikrofont venni, sajnos.
Te nem emlékszik nekem most.
Okay. Now I will mute myself and remove my camera so that we can all enjoy Albert's speech. Please proceed, Albert. You can start now.
Hello?
Yes, you can start. Go on, Albert, please.
Hello, you can hear me?
Your volume is very low. Can you put it a bit up. Can you amplify the sound, please? There is a suggestion that you might. Okay, that's better.
Okay.
That's better.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this is a very challenging experience.
Terrible experience.
Okay. Now we have sorted all the technical stuff, so please let us hear your talk.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, everything is perfect now. We can hear you and we see your presentation. So proceed.
Okay, I can begin?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Dober dan, good morning from Valencia. My intervention is to invite you to travel to a house of Pompeii by the Hellenistic and Roman pottery. Above all, I apologize because my English pronunciation. Sorry. Pompeii is a special site with an incredible archaeological repertory, like you can see. But above all, the town was an economic and productive place. So the ceramic is determined by this situation. The most of the rich Pompeian were not old aristocratic. They were self-made men, more or less of the middle class. We know a few of them, like Scaurus, the merchant of canned fish. He was mayor and he decorated the mosaics of his big house with the cans of fish. The jars you can see in the upper left part. In Pompeii, there are a lot of contexts in situ because of the famous eruption in 79. But the pottery at Pompeii has not been studied until the last year. The Congress in 2016, 4 years ago only, has been very important. Now we focalize the intervention on the finds in the Ariana house and the Villa delle Augustale street. It has been a long-term project. So I summarize 15 years of works about pottery at Pompeii. The house of Ariadna has been studied by stratigraphical excavation and above all about the ceramic complex. It has been the basic system to date and to know the evolution of house. We know 4 big periods, you can see. But by excavation, we have identified the previous period to the construction of the big house. Before the big house was a factory of perfumes of Hellenistic type from the middle of 2nd century BC. The first example is a big foss. We knew that before the first building, the space, all the insula, was the site of banquets and rituals from the 4th century BC. So we can consider it normal in this space, these abnormal finds. This big contest was very well dated by eponym, a Rhodian eponym of this date. So we can date the contest in the first argument by the date of the Rhodian eponym. These fins, this foss, could be the remain of a big banquet. There were a lot of frying pans to cook, fine table to drink and eat, and Greek and Roman wine amphora and tunic amphora of fish. So it must be the remain of a good banquet for a lot of people in the middle of 2nd century. After this big banquet, a perfume factory was created. In the late 2nd century BC, the big house was built and the factory was destroyed. But before the destruction of the factory, a peculiar deposit had been placed in the bottom of a small pool of the factory. Hellenistic laginos and other fine wares appeared without amphora and other debris. It must be a ritual offering related with the end of the activity in the perfume factory. Very different is this deposit of ungüentaria. It is directly related with the end of the activity in this site as well. It is a little bit later than the former deposit you had seen before. Along this period, we can see different moments of the house with the house utilized like house, but other moments the space was utilized by factories. So from the Tiberian period, more or less, the big house changed to a big factory. In the south was created a complete perfume factory with the elements to make perfumes. You can see the painting wall of the Casa dei Betti that show all the process to the fabrication of perfumes. In the excavation, we have found more or less the different elements that we can see in the painting wall. Along the Via de Augustali, so the south street of the Ariadna house, there were other elements and a small place to make perfumes from the beginning of the 1st century AD. It was very interesting. Other contests. This is a field of a pool for perfumes, but the most of the pottery was very peculiar, but it's very easy to relate this pottery with the functional activity in this area, because this peculiar contest, we can explain this peculiar contest because the perfumes were made in this moment with the mix of flowers and olive oil. The most of the pottery in the pool were the potteries to grow the flowers. So it's normal find this pottery in this area. It's not normal in other area on the town. Another big pool was fulfilled of pottery, coins, and different types of vessel of glass above all ungüentaria. It seemed that the objects collapsed into the pool because of a natural disaster, no ritual. In the beginning, we think in the famous 62 quark, but after the study of the pottery and coins, the date must be around 45. So in Pompeii must be other quark in before the big quark in the 62. In this contest, the vessels of glass were very abundant. So the taberna could be a place to bottle the perfumes before to sell. Like you can see other time in the painting wall of Casa dei Betti, in this part of the painting, it's possible to distinguish the moment where the perfume is bottled in this small ungüentaria. Another deposit is very different. In this case, is related with human daily activity. In this contest, the fine ware was very scarce, but was very important to date the full file near 79 AD.
Sorry, time. We are approaching.
Okay. I am finishing. Finally, we arrive to the end. The catastrophe of Vesuvius eruption. In this moment, the floor of the Tabernae 26 collapsed into an underground cellar. This Tabernae should be the site to sell the perfumes. The carrot amphora, you can see, from Palestine, could be to entertain the clients with the dates, and the other amphora, the Rhodian one, with the wine. The last example is a big cellar of the house. This big space was filled with the eruption activity. In the same time, it was a cellar and a sanctuary. The group of amphora are the cellar object, of course, but the object placed under the snake in the middle of this space must be considered offerings to protect the food in the cellar. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for overcoming all the technical difficulties and giving us a very interesting and fascinating account of a very interesting context. If there are any immediate questions from the audience, we can perhaps take one at this point. If not, then we can leave it for the general discussion. And now we can go further to the next present. Yes, please, Albert, please, can you stop sharing your screen?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Now you can go and have a glass of water. Everything's fine now. Okay. Our next speaker is our colleague Platon Petridis with another classicist theme. I presume that is why I was invited to chair this session. The title is Ola et Domus, Interpreting the History of Late Roman Houses based on the study of the pottery. So Platon, you have already started sharing your screen. You can start talking. Can we hear you?
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Now we can see you also. That's good. Pleased to meet you. Please
Okay.
proceed.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you. When I received the invitation to participate to this conference, I started thinking about how a stereotypical approach of the ceramic material, however precise it may be, can easily lead to incorrect conclusions concerning the interpretation of the evolution of residential spaces. So I choose two case studies illustrating what is my real concern today, to show at what point architecture, or more precisely stratigraphy, and pottery are two aspects of the same coin that they cannot be seen separately. Because I'm afraid nowadays more and more specialization often leads pottery specialists and excavators to work without a real interaction. The first of my case studies is the so-called Southeast Villa, or Secteur au Sud-Est du Péribol, excavated and published by Vincent Desroches and myself in the 1990s. And it is a luxury house whose construction dates back from the end of the 4th century, while at the end of the 6th century, during the 6th century, total number, internal modifications increased the total number of its triclinia to 4. Around 580, its occupants left the southeastern villa, while about a decade later, the doors of many rooms were blocked, and some of the spaces were turned into refuse disposals. Craftsmen settled there, mainly potters, but also metallurgists and tanners or dyers. And I'll show you the kilns, deposit, the main deposit, and the tannery or dye workshop. The harvest of ceramic finds in this excavation was very rich and corresponded to a wide range of activities inside and outside the house, from the transportation and storage of products, to the preparation of food and its consumption, of course, and from lighting to various other activities like producing metal objects, behaving or stamping, for instance, the holy bread. In addition to local ceramics, imported material of good quality, at least as far as tableware is concerned, were also found in large quantities. The latter include Delphi, a network that concerns cities in central and southern Greece, where North African imports dominate Asia Minor ones. We should notice here that the bulk of the pottery was found concentrated in specific areas. In two of the auxiliary rooms of the eastern triclinium, and in the main deposit next to the west triclinium. And the rest of the space was almost free of pottery, with the exception of some vases found inside the pottery kilns. So these are two distinct sets, almost closed, the first of which, on the basis of coins and red slip pottery, cannot be dated after 580, and the other dating from about 590 to 620. All the red slip ware, or black or white painted ware from central Greece or Attica, were found exclusively in the rooms next to the triclinium. On the contrary, local pottery was found both there and of course in the workshops, in the latter of course in abundance. The ceramics found in the auxiliary rooms of the East Triclinium apparently belonged to the occupants of the villa as long as it functioned as a residence, while that of the deposits comes, as can be seen from the discard found there, from the production of local workshops. And I remind you that the pottery has been analyzed both chemically and petrographically. So the above proves, first of all, that the same pottery was produced in Delphi before and after the abandonment of the villa and its transformation into a workshop area. But is typological classification of these objects enough for make assumptions about the villa's own history without the knowledge of their stratigraphy? And how easy is it to interpret the function of the various rooms of the villa without a holistic view of the excavation? How would we interpret the pottery found at this house if we did not have the unshakable evidence for the existence of pottery workshops? For instance, would we consider that ceramics were used only in these specific 2 small rooms? And if so, how would it be justified to find in such a luxurious house cooking and storage and serving utensils in such a small space, when we know from the sources and other corresponding ensemble that in the large and rich houses, functions such as the storage of supplies, the preparation or the consumption of food, or even the weaving were carried out in clearly different spaces? The answers comes from the excavation data, from the study of stratigraphy and the chronology given by stratigraphy. The possibility of dating with relatively high accuracy the 2 distinct sets mentioned above proves that just before their installation, the artisans, potters, and others cleaned the area from the ceramics used in the villa and threw them in the areas next to the eastern triclinium. And indeed, the entire eastern part of the villa was never reused by the craftsmen. And let us now move further north to the capital of Thasos Island, Limenas. And there, an urban domus, codenamed Dome 5, is thoroughly excavated within the framework of the a joint program of the French School at Athens, the Ephorate of Antiquities of Kavala, the Université Lilloise, and the National and Capodician University of Athens. The villa exceeds 1,000 square meters at the ground floor and seems to follow, in fact, with great symmetry, as you can see, the usual type with rooms extend in wings around supposed, we have not excavated it yet, a supposed courtyard. Built at the beginning of the 5th century AD, the villa was abandoned by its inhabitants around 620, following, according to existing evidence, the fate of the entire city. And I show you, en passant, some of the decoration of the building. As in Delphi, the pottery found is very rich and includes all the categories that one would expect in a house: transport and storage vessels, cookingware, table vessels for serving liquids and the consumption of liquids of solids, lighting, and utensils for fishing or waving. In the case of Thasos, the imports of tableware and lamps have Asia Minor as their main place of origin, something that places the island in a different network from Delphi, including in this network, cities from northern Greece and the Aegean Islands. A traditional study, typology and dating of the ceramics that came to light at the Villa Dome 5 of Thasos on its own, cut from the excavation context, would tell us the story of a rich family, which had the necessary clay household that responded to the consumption of certain products, meat and fish mainly, in large quantities. If we did not know the type of food, information given by the archaeozoological and archaeobotanical study conducted respectively by Tarak Weslati and Evi Margaritis, we would fantasize about delicious meals until the last period of this home's life. But even knowing the content of these meals, especially oysters found in impressive quantities there, and hunting, we can misinterpret them as samples of rich meals in order to impress the guests, as Roman writers often inform us of. But was that the way things were happening in Thasos? Should we imagine laying rich meals in the reception areas of the villa? And I show you an imaginary menu, using imported ceramics for its presentation until the end of the house's life? Or does the study of the architecture of the villa and especially stratigraphy lead us to other paths? Indeed, the latter proves that around 575 AD, there is a gradual degradation of the building's infrastructure and the creation of deposits in the very rooms where ceramics and shells accumulate and whose doors are blocked, just as in the case of Delphi. The beginning of a construction site in the triclinium, here on your left, which began but was never completed, is something very interesting. But it is also interesting to note at the same time the construction of an oven at the right of the slide, an oven for bread and food baking, right in front of the triclinium, which obviously in its condition and with the oven in front of it was not used anymore, no longer used as such. I think that the key to the correct interpretation of the history of the Villa Dom 5, in combination with the findings, ceramics, coins and others, probably lies in the existence of this oven used by more than one families, as was done relatively recently in villages of Thasos. Perhaps as more than one family lived together in the area of the once luxurious house, and perhaps finally finding the thousands of oyster shells and deer bones proves not the high, but on the contrary, the very low standard of living of the inhabitants of the house. It is very likely that these families did not have enough domestic animals and supported their daily diet not in organized livestock, but in what the sea, a few hundred meters to the west, or the hunting at the nearby Acropolis would offer them. As from the red slipwares from Asia Minor, North Africa, or Central Greece that were found in the stratigraphic groups of the same period, I mean 775, 620, and many of them in the same place with oyster shells. Most of them must have been inherited from the previous generation, used maybe for a short period, or they are just their debris collected and dumped there during the site cleanup by the new tenants, just as in the case of Delphi and craftsmen. Given the deterioration of the villa's infrastructure mentioned above, these objects were merely signs of the prosperity of a recent past that a sharp or a progressive change in economic circumstances left without continuity. The inhabitants of the last phase of Thasian villa, therefore, belonged, like the potters and towers of Delphi, to a quite poor population, which nevertheless survived a difficult economic and political conjuncture in the last decades of the 6th and during the 5th century. And they did not manage just to survive. They continued to produce very good quality ceramics, as you saw from Delphi, and in an effort of great self-sufficiency and coverage of almost all domestic and outdoor needs by local production. In Thasos, at the same time, the local production has to offer us an interesting innovation, the application of the glazing technique. Well-made lamps, and I show you an example very close to what our colleague Manolova showed us before, and I assure you, Maria, we have exactly the same as you showed us from by red clay. So we have these well-made lamps with traces of glaze, and also these shirts with thin green glaze here. All of that proving that in conjunction with findings from neighboring Philippi, glaze appeared, or rather reappeared, in Greece before the 7th century, a time limit that is still tenaciously supported by some colleagues, I hope very few here in Greece. And it was probably a technique that survived, more or less alive, throughout the Roman period. So, to sum up, as can be seen from the above, a sterile typological approach of the ceramic material no matter how typologically accurate, can easily lead to erroneous conclusions. The historical information deriving from the study of the ceramics from use-related or discard contexts of a residential complex is directly related to the good study of its stratigraphy and the careful interpretation of all the data provided to us by an excavation. And this becomes more and more critical for periods such as the second half of the 6th and the whole 7th century, alias period of transformations, as late Roman society is transformed into medieval, but is still retaining some structures and shapes of the late antiquity. And this is a period that has a special dynamic, in my point of view, thanks to which this transformation will lead to the extraordinary things that will see the light in the mid-Byzantine period. So, thank you.
Thank you indeed for this interesting twist in the story. I always like it very much when things that we take for granted get topsy-turvy in archaeological research. It's one of my favorite moments in research. Thank you very much for giving us another opportunity to rethink our stereotyped images that oysters, for example, have to mean luxury. Yeah. It's a real good twist. Thank you very much. And thank you for keeping in time. Do we have any questions for Plato? Is it okay if I anglicize your name?
No, that's okay, yes.
In the chat probably, or some other means, do we have any questions?
I don't see anything at all.
No, neither do I, but I have to give an opportunity to everybody. Okay. So if that is the question, then probably if that is the case, then we shall probably leave it for the general discussion at the end of the day. And we can now proceed with the last presentation in this particular session, which is going to be given by Zauro Geliki. And the title is Baking Bread in Italy in the Early Middle Ages. Do yes. We have Zauro over here? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Will you share your screen, please?
So now I try to open my PowerPoint.
Yes, it is. The process has started. Hopefully it will soon appear.
I hope. Yes.
Well, this really is a trying technical solution, but it's much better than not having conferences at all. Okay, we do have your presentation and we have your screen. We have you vocally, so please take the floor. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you too. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can, clearly and loudly. We can see lovely pictures of bread making, so please go on.
Thank you very much. So thanks for the invitation to this conference and congratulations about the program and the paper I heard yesterday, today. So in 1975, Tiziano Mannoni published in the volume The Medieval Pottery at Genoa and in Liguria, a type of pottery that he called testo da pane, a flattened bell-shaped vase that was used as a refractory down for baking bread. In Liguria, this type would have been documented only in urban context a rather late 15th century AD. In 1984, Gianpietro Brogiolo and I submitted a paper to the Congress Medieval Ceramics in Western Mediterranean, entitled La ceramica grezza medievale nella pianura padana, Common Pottery in the Po Valley. This paper came out in print 2 years later, 1986. In that occasion, we discussed the shape which we define as catino coperchio, basin cover. We concluded about that shape as follows. The basin cover is the most documented ceramic shape in both early medieval and late medieval context in the north, Italy. Its origin is to be found in a tradition that dates back to protohistoric times and that, in marginal context, from a social and cultural point of view, lasted throughout the Roman era. From the point of view of functionality, the basin cover must have represented a sort of portable oven, reproducing in a reduced version the same condition as the bread-making ovens, whose presence must have been alien to rural context. In 1988, 3 American scholars working in Molise, Italy, published a paper in the papers of the British School at Rome entitled Testa and Clibani, the baking covers of classical Italy. In this work, a shape is identified archaeologically that would be called testus or clibanus in Latin text. Basically, a belly-shaped vessel from baking food, particularly bread, a sort of portable oven. Here, the chain of bibliographical references is different from the previous one, and the relations with the possible successor of the Roman clibanus are easily delegated to a small paper by David Whitehurst, but written in English and published in Antiquity, where already in 1978, a connection between Roman clibanus and the late medieval bread testi, Ligurian testi, was hypothesized. A situation, as it often happens in our research, you say the same or similar things and you ignore each other, also because you may speak different languages, but you are dealing with the same subject and most probably the same object, if not the same function. About the function of the objects, not all scholars agree that the association between the Latin word clibanus and the object we are talking about is secure. But I don't want to deal with this problem. What I would like to do is to consider the archaeological form from we are discussing, which has 3 main characteristics: bell shape, a carination between the upper and lower wall marked on the exterior by projecting flange. Finally, went holes, generally one in the wall. A ring-shaped loop at the top are sometimes present or documented. There are also rare specimens with a large hole on the top. The dimensions vary, but generally exceed 30 to 40 centimeters at the base. These objects were placed directly on a plane and covered with ash. In some examples, the lower wall with beefed or otherwise intricate foot suggests interlocking or an underlying vessels. It is not possible to describe the variants of this shape, of which there are many. Chronologically speaking, portable ovens are documented from Roman time, if not earlier. I show you 2 slides with some example of the Roman time and until the late Middle Ages, as we have seen. This is the distribution map drawn up in 1988 for Italy, only relating to Roman and late antique example, but it should be significantly updated. Despite some uncertainties, there is a general agreement that they were mainly used to bake bread. It is with this in mind that we will briefly analyze their fortune and use over time in Italy. Portable ovens of this type are still documented in late antique contexts. In southern Italy, for example, they are discovered at the Mitello site near Otranto in 7th, 8th century context. In northern Italy, at the Montebarro Castle, in context of the beginning of the 6th century AD. But these are only some examples. Outside Italy, for example, they are in context of the same period in Albania, in Onesmos fortress or in Butrint, excavation in the Vrina Valley. It may be interesting to note that the specimen of this, the specimen without a progent flange also appear. A ring and the ring loops above the top begin to be frequent. In the early Middle Ages, portable ovens are present throughout the Italian peninsula, especially in the northern Italy, in both urban and rural context. So I show you some other example from the North Italian context of the early and medieval age. However, some of the deformant elements that had been characteristic of the original form are lost. That is, the projecting flange disappear completely and ring loops appear on the wall and on the upper part of the vessel. A vent hole on the wall continues to be present. There are no documented examples with the larger central holes in the upper part as in the Roman times. The dimensions are almost the same, 30-40 centimeters of diameter. Occasionally, these objects also appear in context after the year 1000, although much as frequently as in the early Middle Ages. Contrary to popular belief, the production and the consumption of cereals in early medieval Italy and the Europe, of course, must have been rather modest. The farmer's diet must have been based on integrated diet, but certainly not one centered on cereals, as was later to be the case. Only after the years 1000, in fact, we are faced with profound changes in the management of agricultural crops, increase in cultivated land, and with popular growth, so that cereals and bread had to become important in the diet of the common people. It is not by chance that from this period onwards, representation of bread production become very common, but always through the use of a big bread ovens with a few rare exceptions. All this must be taken into account when we analyze in our context, studying this form and seeking comparisons with the ancient words. With regard to the Roman period, Taberley and others had recognized a kind of decline in urban use of portable ovens from the 1st century AD onwards. What are the socio-economic explanations? More commercialization and thus more development of large bakeries, less self-sufficiency, and the development of a rented accommodation. Thus, the use of portable ovens would be the preserve of wealthier families. In late antiquity, portable ovens continue to be present and even seem to increase in some areas. E.g., Butrint, Albania, in the Vrina excavation site we have seen, or in northern Italy. There don't seem to be differences between urban and rural sites, even if they seem to become prevalent in towns or in community contexts, such as military ones, e.g. castles. This is the consequence of increase of fragmentation, less commercialization and management capacity for large-scale production. In early Middle Ages, portable ovens are widespread, although in some areas they disappear completely, like Apulia and outside Italy, Albania. This doesn't seem strange, since the coasts of Albania and Apulia are very much connected at this time. We could also note that this form doesn't not appear in Constantinople either, at least according to the context of Saraceni site. This aspect is very interesting and should be further investigated. This could be explained by the change in diet in some Byzantine areas after the 7th century AD. But this problem should be investigated by reconstructing a secure map of the distribution of this form out Italy. Back to Italy, there are not archaeological evidence of other types of bread ovens in urban and rural contexts of this period. This reduction must be attributed not so much to widespread use of the portable ovens as to a decrease in cereal consumption. The presence of portable ovens in urban areas is therefore not necessarily linked to a process of ruralization of urban context, but perhaps to a socially selected use. To conclude, the history of Diclibanus, if that is the name of the form we are talking about, or better, possible portable ovens, does seem to be a long history of continuity with some question marks. The function that they were used to bake bread is the most widely accepted hypothesis, but not all scholars agree with it. 2, distribution over time. This form is generally not very present in archaeological context, except from late antiquity and in certain more specific areas, the early Middle Ages. 3, its distribution in space. Even territorially, there are some differences. The most conspicuous at the moment seems to be the disappearance, at least in the early medieval deposit, of some Byzantine sites. This datum could have an important social and cultural significance, but it needs to be better investigated. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Zauro. It was very essential speaking about bread and also very important. And
very essential.
And it gives rise, of course, to the fact that, to the thinking, to the discussing the fact that some forms and some functions can be indeed very long-lasting, but they need not coexist. A form and a function don't really have to match all the time in the same way. So it really is interesting to see how things have been changing over a period of time and in what kind of continuity or differences we can discern from a very single and humble type of pottery. Thank you very much. And now, since Zaura was also very prompt in timekeeping, we have time for a question or two from the floor. If anybody wants to pose the question either live or in chat, now would be the right moment. Now everybody probably got hungry because of all the talk about bread and all the lovely pictures.
Bread for everybody.
Yes, well, it is almost the, lunchtime. So the organizers authorized me to announce that there will be a short break now until 2:30, 2:30. And the next session will start on the new link that you have already been sent. So please log in with the new link at in 15 minutes at 2:30. I would like to thank all the speakers for the interesting and inspiring session. And I am particularly happy that there has been quite a lot of topics concerning classical antiquity and early medieval times, because somehow all the talk about pottery seems to be more or less, all the advancements in pottery analysis somehow seem to be intuitively linked to the prehistorians, whereas our classicist point of view sometimes get lost. So this session proves that it is not the case. And I would like very much again to thank the organizers for giving the opportunity to have a very wide coverage of subjects concerning pottery and all the related issues in archaeology. So thank you very much, and a 15-minute break. See you at 2:30.